So I'm Susan Randall, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Washtenaw County. On behalf of the League's Juvenile Justice Team, I'd like to welcome all of you this morning for this learning session. A couple of comments about the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan voter education organization that encourages informed, active participation in government. And while the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take positions on issues that we have studied. And one policy area, the Justice for Kids and Communities Act, is one we have studied and supported. There were 19 bills under this landmark legislation that passed in the last legislative session and are to begin implementation this October of 2024. So here to help us understand Washtenaw County Court's vision for reform, including how changes to the Child Care Fund might assist new approaches to diversion, to community-based care, and to collaboration, is the Honorable Patrick J. Conlin, Jr. He's Chief Judge of the Washtenaw County Trial Court and the presiding judge of the Family and Juvenile Divisions. Judge Conlin was elected by the voters of Washtenaw County in 2014 and took the bench in January of 2015. He's a graduate of Ann Arbor's Gabriel Richard High School and the University of Notre Dame. And Judge Conlin completed his Juris Doctorate degree from Wayne State University in 1997. He is a member of the State Bar of Michigan, the American Bar Association, and inviting the Honorable Judge Patrick Conlin to join us and share his vision for this new opportunity before us with juvenile justice reform. I will just mention, after Judge Conlin's prepared remarks, he is going to respond to any questions you might have, and we ask you to submit them through chat. The questions will be read by League member Jane, and we invite you, as the remarks go along, to feel free to submit them through this learning session. All right, Judge Conlin, you're on.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit less sort of formally than from my trial court bio. But I want to thank the League of Women Voters. I remember, and I just said this when I first logged on, I remember campaigning. So my thanks to the League, who does a top-notch job of these types of things. The education to the public about voting for candidates as well as for issues I remember this from my campaign. So my gratitude for having me today, which also forces me to fess up a little bit that, I understand that people want to hear from the judge, but I have to get out ahead of this and tell everyone who's listening out there in TV land that this is not my effort. This is absolutely being led and partnered with internal and external teams of people that are much smarter than myself. So my background is really relatively recent in juvenile justice. So my law practice, really, I didn't represent many children. Sometimes if they were children of the firm, we would be involved in their legal issues if that was necessary. But I didn't do a lot of juvenile law as a lawyer, and I haven't done it. I've been a judge I'm in my 10th year, and I've only been working in the juvenile division really for about a year and a half. And so this is all pretty new to me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn about it. And I'll share more about that vision in a minute. But I have to get out ahead of this and say, from the court standpoint, I couldn't be doing this without the solid help of my team. And my team includes Catherine O'Grady, who's our juvenile court administrator in this particular area, her entire staff, including the probation department, which has historically and recently done such a fine job of working with the youth in Washtenaw County. My own staff, who have some more experience than I do in this, is incredibly helpful. And then our community partners have been amazing in terms of the resource that they've offered, and in particular as it relates to the changes to these laws that are coming online on October 1st. So I have an introduction, and then I have a set of questions. I wanted to make that specific kind of shout out to my team But when we get into kind of the particulars, I'll talk a little bit about some of our community partners. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of an intro, and then there are a series of questions that I have some responses to, and then I'm going to take questions from the floor. And if there's something that anyone doesn't understand and you want to put something in the chat, I can either follow up later with that, or if it's something that is particular, then one of the hosts can interrupt me and I can speak to it at that point. Okay? All right. So as Chief Judge of the Washtenaw County Trial Court, I'm pleased to be coordinating many of the reform initiatives that will be happening in Washtenaw County as it surrounds these legislative changes to the juvenile statutes in our state. The efforts involve many people from across the communities we serve. Over the past 3 years, which is kind of the window to look forward to this October, there was talk about these sweeping changes to juvenile justice, as well as kind of some internal reflection and need for reviewing our own processes. So Washtenaw County embarked on 2 major initiatives to improve the way it serves young people impacted by the juvenile justice system. First, the county proposed the development of a county assessment connection center, which will serve as a hub for identifying the strengths, needs, and risks of each youth. The center will be instrumental in driving individual treatment planning, as well as understanding the trends and systemic needs of this population. I'm going to give you a preview here because one of the themes that's going to weave through the answer to almost every question I was provided is the need for our own evaluation, but in specific, the requirement of the state of Michigan that we collect data on all of our initiatives and programming, because not only is the success tied to evidence-based practice, but the child care fund funding is also going to be tied to that. So again, more to come, and pay attention as I answer every question as it relates to data. Back to the introduction, though, at the same time, one outside or external team came together, the Washtenaw Equity Partnership, and that group set out to use qualitative and quantitative data to study inequities in the juvenile and adult criminal legal systems. And they did a lot of work surrounding this. The findings, which reflected the state juvenile justice racial and ethnic disparities data dashboard, revealed significant disparities, particularly among Black youth at various stages of Washtenaw County's legal system, including arrest, probation supervision, and placement in secure detention, underscoring the urgent need for action. As these initiatives have advanced at the local level, the Michigan Task Force on Juvenile Justice Reform, and I'll just call it the task force because it is the statewide task force, convened in 2021 to conduct a statewide analysis of Michigan's juvenile justice system, complete with recommendations for changes in state law, policy, and appropriations to improve youth outcomes. The final recommendations of the task force emphasize the importance of diverting youth away from the justice system and expanding community-based services to address the root causes of problem behavior. So those are 2 outside sets of eyes looking at how youth in the state of Michigan is addressed by the juvenile justice system and how the system can address the needs of youth. Additionally, the juvenile division of our trial court is working with the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice at Wayne State University to help us develop a roadmap for the reforms that ties together the recommendations of the Washtenaw Equity Partnership, the Millage Commission vision for Youth Assessment Center, tying back to the earlier point that I made, and that Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force recommendation set. The roadmap will help ensure that the reform efforts are integrated and eliminate duplicative and countervailing work. By joining these efforts, the court and the county are taking a holistic public health approach to employ early interventions to prevent youth from becoming entangled in the justice system and to ensure that those youth who are involved with the justice system receive the services they need at the right security level to both protect public safety and to prevent reoffending. So that was kind of a general introduction, kind of going into the questions. I want to make a couple of other points, though, that are observations that I've had in the last year and a half in serving as the the judge assigned to juvenile delinquency. So historically, juvenile law has had the side that is abuse and neglect, and that side of it, and then there's the delinquency side. And so I'm the judge that oversees the delinquency cases. There's a different judge overseeing the abuse and neglect side of the juvenile court. But my two observations. One is, it's anecdotal, but I want to just sort of let you know kind of my perspective. One of the comments about the disparity among Black youth in detention, I want to talk a bit about detention, because I've gone to some trainings and I actually was kind of wide-eyed that states like California are moving in this direction, but there was this discussion really of a juvenile system of detention that looked just like prison, like sentencing kids to prison. And that was a bit of a shock to me, because right after I became the judge in the juvenile division, I took a tour of our juvenile detention center. And I have to just tell you that it's an amazing place. So I'm not shy about potentially placing kids in detention, because it is a safe place. It is a clean and well-maintained place. It has classrooms. It has, recreation opportunities. And I think it has kind of the weird institutional version of what home life is like. Washing machines, like kids can be there. And my observation and discussion with the staff is that a lot of kids feel safe there. They may not want to go there, but that there really is a sense of security and safety. And so I guess when I went into it thinking of something Dickensian and dark, that wasn't my experience. And so I want to reassure anyone who's listening who's never had a tour of the Juvenile Detention Center that it actually is a pretty amazing place. And I am, like I said, part of the team that I have the richness in my own building with our staff and our probation department. I'm incredibly impressed by the team that runs the detention center, the programming, the therapy, and all of that good intention, education, programming, ideology. It's all there. And so I want to just make that point that if you're in this meeting and thinking that juvenile detention is like a prison, that wasn't my observation nor my experience of that. And then the other piece of this is that I don't know anybody who works in this area, whether it's, and from my perspective, it's lawyers, public defender, prosecutor. It's also the mental health providers and the other providers that are all involved in programming and therapy and work with kids. Nobody is in this, I think, because they're not interested in these outcomes. The statewide scrutiny of how to divert and deflect, of how to keep kids out of the juvenile justice system, I think is incredibly well-intentioned and it will be well executed. But I do think that everybody who's involved in this from the provider standpoint is in it to win it, like to just sort of to give everyone a pep talk about it. And I'm incredibly impressed by that. It is an incredibly detail-rich thing, though, in terms of these sweeping changes. And so, just to sort of get to our first question, I'll just point out that, Washtenaw County is one of the 12 initial trial courts to have formed a work group of key stakeholders to begin developing detailed implementation. So the mandate from the state of Michigan for every county in the state is to create a work group to implement these legislative changes locally. And so we submitted our work group to the state, and apparently we were in the top 12, like the first 12 to create that. So we've created a task force locally to look at this, stakeholders across the county. And if there's anybody on the call that has a desire to bring your expertise to this, that work group is kind of just getting started, and we'll create subgroups to create the changes that are necessary. So there's more to come there, and there will be an opportunity for a lot more involvement. So we're excited about that. If I can start with the first question that was provided, I'll read the question and I'll read my response, and that may generate further questions. The expansion of community-based services. With the recent reforms expanding the scope of the Child Care Fund to support community-based services more broadly, could you detail how Washtenaw County plans to utilize this fund to enhance existing services or introduce new initiatives aimed at keeping youth within their communities? And then there's a sub question there, pre-arrest and pre-court diversion. How is Washtenaw County leveraging the Child Care Fund to implement or expand pre-arrest and pre-court diversion programs? What types of programs are being prioritized? And how do you foresee them impacting youth interactions with the justice system? So through the mapping process initiated as part of this Youth Assessment Center implementation, we are identifying existing services already in place throughout the county and uncovering any gaps in the service array. We would foresee that the Youth Assessment Center would serve as the referral hub for community-based services available to youth who are at risk of entering the justice system. Law enforcement, schools, and concerned parents could make a referral to the Youth Assessment Center for help. The assessment center will conduct the required risk and needs screener and mental health screener to be able to refer the youth and family to the services needed to prevent justice system involvement. Specific requirements for the organizational eligibility for the Child Care Fund reimbursement have not yet been released by MDHHS, but we are in contact with the department so we can integrate their decisions into our roadmap as soon as the guidelines are available. So I want to be clear that the Child Care Fund is not going to be directed locally. Like, it's not something that Washtenaw County is going to create the criteria for that funding. It is going to be it is essentially going to be delivered to us as a roadmap from Lansing. So that's going to be the Health and Human Services Division that will direct that. In the past few years, the Juvenile Division has been developing and recreating programming that focuses on decreasing conditions that lead to criminogenic behavior, most notably programs that address behavioral health issues, improve academic performance, and develop experiential learning and employment life skills. So we are looking at those broad silos of ways to deliver services to the youth that will keep them either minimally involved in or hopefully completely out of the juvenile justice system. But again, I'll just remind you, or I'll restate, we are focusing on behavioral health, mental health treatment, positive change for kids through improved academic performance, experiential learning, that recognizing that kids don't learn, every kid doesn't learn the same way. And then, potential employment and life skills training. So those are all things that adults need as well. But I think if we can intervene and interject into the youth system, the juvenile system, that's going to be with some greater chance of success. So that was the first question. Second question, emergency shelter and respite care. The inclusion of emergency shelter and respite care in the increased Child Care Fund reimbursement rates for community-based services marks a significant step. Can you discuss how these services will be integrated into Washtenaw County's juvenile justice system to support at-risk youth and their families? Excuse me. The need for respite care and shelter placements has been identified as a gap in the service array available for youth in our communities. We will be discussing all of the community service gaps within our implementation work groups to determine what is needed, where it is needed, and how best to address the needs of the communities. Once we have identified specific service needs, the work groups will recommend a process by which we can obtain identified services. And so again, that idea of respite care and shelter placements is important to us. It's important to the state of Michigan because it was part of the determination, but it's also not the only thing that we're looking at. And so again, part of this task force view is to take a look at any gaps that exist and how we can begin to implement them. All right, third question. Measuring impact. Given these reforms, what measures or indicators is Washtenaw County planning to use to assess the effectiveness of using the Child Care Fund for expanded community-based services, including pre-arrest and pre-court diversion programs, as well as emergency shelter and respite care? So back to one of my original themes, becoming a data-driven court and youth justice system is an important next step in the evolution as an innovative system for kids. That doesn't sound innovative or sexy because data is sometimes, limited to the few that love to study that. But it is both critically important to us, meaning we need programming that is effective, and data is what's going to yield performance metric, but also it's very tied to the child care fund. It is an evidence-based determination, and so we need to be very mindful of the evidence or the data that we're collecting. We anticipate that performance measures will need to be developed, defined, and regularly tracked for each stage of the youth justice system. And this will be one of the priorities of the trial court's youth justice reform work group. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. Recently, the Juvenile Division implemented an electronic case management system that will allow the court to begin collecting real-time data. I will say, unfortunately and confusingly, I believe that system is called Youth Center, which sounds a lot like the Youth or Juvenile Detention Center name. So I just want to be clear that that's just the name of the data collection system that we are using. All right. Next question, challenges in implementation. Implementing these reforms requires collaboration across various agencies and organizations. What challenges do you anticipate in this collaborative effort, and how does Washtenaw County plan to address these changes to ensure the effective use of the Child Care Fund for these purposes? So numerous community organizations and county departments, law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, defense attorneys, public defender will have been or will be involved in the discussions regarding the Youth Assessment Center, the Washtenaw Equity Partnership recommendations, and the Juvenile Justice Reform Work Group. The roadmap will integrate these organizations into one kind of intertwined or braided implementation plan that will move the reforms forward together. The trial court's multidisciplinary work group will continue to meet to ensure that the reforms move forward and to review progress and outcomes. As I said before, the Child Care Fund will expect direct evidence-based practices, of which some organizations and agencies are currently not implementing. Reimbursement is not available under these circumstances, so we anticipate that not all service providers will be eligible for child care funds and thus not in a position to respond to requests for contract proposals with the court or the county. A process will have to be developed through these programs, through our local evaluation and programming in tandem with MDHHS requirements. I do want to sort of say this is early. And so if there are providers listening out there, one of the things that we would suggest, and we can't do this for providers, but if providers don't have a history of data collection or evidence-based evaluation metrics, that doesn't mean that a provider can't partner with somebody who does. And so there are groups and agencies and universities out there that collect this data and do these performance evaluation metrics. And so I would encourage any providers that are interested to look at this partnership early. Don't wait till October 1st or after to come seeking, again, engagement with the task force and the implementation without these evidence-based collections. So that would be my encouragement takeaway to providers that have good programs but not good data to get into that today. Next question, community partnerships. How is Washtenaw County fostering partnerships with local organizations, nonprofits, and community groups to enhance the reach and effectiveness and services funded by the Child Care Fund? Can you provide examples of successful partnerships or initiatives that have already been established? So the Juvenile Justice fosters child care funded partnerships with the Juvenile Division fosters child care funded partnerships with local nonprofits and organizations for evidence-based services through formal contracts and facilitated engagement opportunities. A couple of examples, and none of these will probably surprise anybody on this call. Long-standing partnerships that we've had, one is the Neutral Zone, provides youth leadership and arts workshop opportunities, phenomenal programming, phenomenal leadership with that organization, and a long history in partnership with the Juvenile Division of the trial court. And so that would be one example. The Student Advocacy Center is currently providing education advocacy for our youth and previously provided mentoring services through a program called Check and Connect. So another historic and current partnership. There's a local group called the Sure Moms Group, is a support group for mothers of court-involved youth that actively provides opportunities for learning and empowerment. And that is connected also, I believe, connected with the Sheriff's Department. And so, again, these are partnerships that we are encouraging, as well as looking to kind of bridge the gap to new partnerships. Similar agencies and organizations have recently acquired small contracts. One example of that is Legacy Barber College, which is providing skilled trades mentoring and pre-apprenticeship barbering for youth under court jurisdiction. The owner and the director of Legacy has shown such strong commitment to the program of our youth that he has relocated with his family to Washtenaw County and is looking for a space to establish a brick and mortar structure in the Ypsilanti area to house his school and provide other resources. So, because of the significant behavioral health issues our youth exhibit, a large portion of the child care funding has been designated to clinical intervention and services with local agencies and practitioners. With the expanded reimbursement, there will be continued engagement with organizations offering the spectrum of reform required in these evidence-based interventions. So we look forward, from the trial court standpoint or the juvenile court standpoint, we look forward to expanding our partnerships and to offering more to the youth. I'm cognizant of the time, but I want to take a little departure. I've got a couple more pages of questions. But one of the things that I've observed and been taught is that the efficacy in courts has to do largely now with the interventional courts or the specialty courts. There's veterans courts, there's mental health courts, there's substance abuse courts, human trafficking courts, and they're all over the country. And I think most of the studies are pointing to the success of those rather than what we'll call the traditional criminogenic side of the court. And I think that is because of the interventional nature of the courts, as well as the partnership with outside successful agencies to redirect and offer resources to those participants. And the juvenile court is no different. In fact, it may be, I'd like to call it a pioneer, because before there were these specialty courts, it's kind of what juvenile court has been doing, is partnering with agencies to bring services to youth in a hopes of diverting youth from the criminal system. And so I want to give a shout out or an enthusiastic kind of evaluation that we are the pioneers, not we the court, but we on this call are the pioneers for this programming for kids. And I think that that's something that we should all be proud of. And that's why we're striving to make sure we get it right with these changes in the statute. All right, diversion aside, back to the questions. Future of the Child Care Fund. Looking ahead, how do you envision Washtenaw County service options evolving in response to the needs of the youth and the juvenile justice system in Washtenaw County? Are there plans for further expansion or modification of services eligible for reimbursement by the Child Care Fund? So Child Care Fund eligibility is established and defined by MDHHS in Lansing. It is not under the power of this court or this county to modify or expand eligibility. That being said, when we invest in deflection and diversion services, we will undoubtedly discover gaps in our service array that will need to be filled in order to meet the needs of youth that we serve. So we anticipate that the first indication of unmet service needs will come from the Youth Assessment Center, which will be the referral hub for deflection and diversion prior to youth involvement. We will also be able to detect unmet needs from the court's perspective, and we will be able to issue requests to the community to fill those needs. How those unmet needs are funded will vary depending on the services needed and the context in which they are needed. So as a partner with all of you, and all of you includes private entities as well as some government agencies, we may be asking for some funding in addition to the Child Care Fund if it's not available to us, and partnership and maybe together we can go back to the Child Care Fund for additional funding. But none of that is mapped out or dictated by the local counties. That's all going to be roadmap from Lansing. Ensuring equity. How is Washtenaw County ensuring that the allocation and utilization of the Child Care Fund are equitable, particularly in reaching youth from the marginalized communities who are disproportionately affected by the justice system? So Child Care Fund eligibility requirements are outside the purview of the courts. In other words, we don't determine that. However, the Child Care Fund will be available to fund services based on the needs of the youth we serve. The needs of the youth is determined by the risk and needs assessment given to each youth, as well as other information obtained from the youth and family drives the service array that must be available. Services must be accessible for youth from across the county, including youth in marginalized communities, whether those communities are urban or rural. One of the, I don't know if it's unique things, it's not solely for Washtenaw County, but we do have both the urban and the rural components in our county. And so we have to take a look at both of those. We are looking to ways to make the courts more accessible to the youth and families in this county, whether that's by remote access through Zoom hearings, whether that is, sometimes requiring people be here for court. But we are taking a good look at that internally. But again, there's not from a funding childcare fund standpoint, the local entities, the court, the county, we can't redirect funding on a priority basis other than what we assess as our needs and the needs of our youth. Next question, savings reinvestment. How does the court plan to reinvest any savings generated from the changes to the child care fund, especially in terms of further supporting or expanding community-based services and initiatives for youth within Washtenaw County? One of the things that we are going to do is we are going to work closely with our county government. We would hope to reinvest any savings realized through focusing on effective community-based service interventions designed to meet the identified needs of youth. So if we can maintain or grow success in the programming that we have, we would look to the county to help us reinvest in that way. The focus on meeting the identified needs within the effective service interventions is going to be critical to this. We would hope that any savings could be reinvested in expanding the service array available to youth and implementing innovative and new approaches to youth justice, such as pilot projects designed to meet underlying needs that bring youth into the justice system. So we're one branch of government. The county commission is a different branch of government. And so, in the same way that we would look to feedback from you as to what you think is working and evaluating what we think is working, we would also reach out to and would ask you to reach out to the county commissioners, county commission, to ask for that reinvestment on things that are working. Risk assessments. How is Washtenaw County incorporating risk assessments and screening tools to determine eligibility for diversion programs over formal court involvement and the use of detention? And what criteria are being used to ensure these tools applied fairly and effectively? The court, along with our community partners and county agencies, is in the process of redesigning the front end of the justice system. A risk and needs and mental health screener is required prior to placement in detention, thereby reserving detention placement for youth based on their risk of reoffending and risk of failing to appear for their hearing. The use of structured, objective, and valid detention screening tool effectively removes race, gender, age, and other factors from the decision to detain. The same is true for the use of valid, normed, and objective risk and needs and mental health assessment used by the court to make diversion decisions. Using the risk assessment helps the court to make diversion decisions based on the youth's assessed risk of reoffending as well as the charged offense. Rather than basing diversion decisions solely on offense or other more subjective factors, we're trying to look to this screening tool to help us make those decisions. Understanding the youth's risk, needs, and mental health status will help the court, our community providers, and the youth's family better understand the interventions that are needed to help the youth live and achieve a productive life. So our court already has a bit of a jump start on the legislatively mandated use of the risk assessment. Over a year ago, we began using a risk assessment that is currently administered pre-disposition. All of our probation officers were trained on its use. The plan, to be consistent with the legislation, is to use a validated screening and assessment tool to inform diversion, the consent calendar, detention, and dispositional decisions. And so I didn't bring that to the court. Our visionary leader in our administration, as well as our visionary probation department, has jumped onto this, and this risk assessment screening tool has been incredibly helpful. And so it will continue to be, and it will continue to be. What it is one of those changes that is required by the changes to legislation, and we're already using it. So that was the set of questions that was provided to me ahead of time. It's about 9:38 or so. And so I am happy to try to answer questions that were provided, and I'll turn it back over to the league to give me those questions.
Thank you very much, Judge Conlin. So I think we have about 5 questions that have been submitted in chat at this point. And our one of our league members, Jane, is going to start from the top and pose the question to you by reading it. And we'll work our way through them. Jane, you're on.
Hey, Belinda Doolin starts with a good morning to everyone, and she has a few questions. So I'll read the first one. Judge mentions tracking data. Are the data factors defined by the court, funder, and or legislation? If so, how does the nonprofit sector access that information?
I'm just making notes so I answer the question. So if I don't fully answer it, come back to me. I think the answer to that is yes. I think that the tracking factors for the data will be primarily delivered to us from Lansing, from MDHHS, and the requirements through the child care funding. And so, data-driven, evidence-based, I think we're going to get that roadmap largely from Lansing. I do believe there's an opportunity for both the court and the county and the agencies to participate and to model what the data collection and then the compilation and evidence-based reporting would be in terms of response. I don't know the specific answer yet because we don't know it from Lansing yet. So I don't know how exacting that will be. I mean, it's government, so I'm going to expect that it's going to be fairly detailed, but we don't know quite yet how detailed it's going to be. So more to come, but we do want to engage the nonprofit sector in terms of both its ability to access the requirements and feed that out to the nonprofit sector, because that's the sector in great measure that's providing a lot of the outcome here. But also that's why I sort of said that if this is a program that is not historically equipped to collect data and to present evidence-based outcomes, that's why I want to get out ahead of time and ask that our local providers start looking for agencies that do that already. So more to come.
And Belinda's second question is diversion defined as pre-court services or being court involved?
Well, diversion has a couple of faces. One, so again, defining how you define, looking at how you define court. So one diversion program is directly through the prosecutor's office and looking at cases that could be theoretically diverted prior to my having any knowledge of them. It could be in the charging, it could be in the way that they're handled. I mean, loosely, you can identify the prosecutor's office not as part of the court, but as part of the court system. So I don't know if that exactly answers that question, but I do think that it includes both coming to the actual court, being the petition being filed and then the court making a determination, but it also includes that as well. There are diversion programs that can be implemented once a case has been petitioned. And then, again, there's 2 ways to look at that. One is that it's diverted and there's maybe the petition is withdrawn or is not completed. The other way is that, and this isn't technically diversion, but a youth can plead to an offense and then successfully complete the requirements of programming, and then that's dismissed. That's not exactly diversion. That's slightly different, but just so you know that that's there.
And part B to that same question is, will there be an opportunity to share resources between DL youth and NA youth?
Short answer is I don't know. I mean, I hope so. I don't know. I'm pretty new to the DL side, which is the delinquency side. And I have no experience with the NA side, which is the neglect and abuse side. From a judge standpoint, I'm the presiding judge of the juvenile division, and so within the court, there is some, there's not even really staffing overlap. That's not an exact way I'm getting at, but we have 2 judges and well, there's really three, but one is kind of got a smaller assignment from a number standpoint, bigger assignment from a historic standpoint. But so there's really two full-time judges handling those dockets, with each judge having a referee. So there's a lot of collaboration between the judges and the referees as they know one another and know the work. But I don't know specifically if I can address how the resources and the lines to be drawn over that would intersect, especially not knowing the child care fund's recommendations or requirements at this time. So I guess I'm sorry to say, Belinda, more to come, but you're providing some great questions for future sessions.
Okay, Joseph Costello says, how are cases assigned when there is a crossover youth, a child that may start out as juvenile delinquent and then the subject of a child abuse, neglect petition, or vice versa? So how are cases assigned when they're crossover youth?
Probably a little naive of me, or maybe not. I don't mean to be evasive, but like the simplest answer is it's kind of which comes first. So if a child comes into the system as being charged or petitioned with a delinquency case, that's what's going to happen first. And if there's then a subsequent action in the neglect and abuse side of things, then the decision would be made as to whether whether Judge Vandenberg, who handles most of those cases, or I gets that thing. There is a tradition across the state. Tradition is kind of a warm and fuzzy way of putting it, but there's basically a mandate from the state court administrator's office that basically there's one judge, one family. So that if a person is processed through different divisions, usually they get the same judge, even if it's a different type of case. And so that would likely be the outcome in this matter, so that if it was first as a delinquency matter, it would be then assigned to me as a neglect and abuse. If it was first in the neglect and abuse side, and then a subsequent delinquency matter, it might be assigned to Judge Vandenberg that way. Or there may be reasons to keep them separate, because there are complicating factors. There's sometimes co-defendants, co-respondents in the juvenile world, and so it depends.
Okay. Next question. Good morning from Sarosi. Thank you, Judge Conlin, for having CBHJ integrate the three efforts: Assessment Center, Washtenaw Equity Partnership, and the TF. How does the work group you referenced interface with CBHJ roadmap effort?
So the CBHJ, again, love the acronyms and all my life, everything. But that's the Center for Behavioral Health and Justice from Wayne State. So that is an organization that I'm just going to give you my understanding, is that group is really spearheading the implementation of these work group development and local changes in the legislation across the state. So the CBHG is kind of leading us at this time in terms of where our group is going toward development. So we've had one meeting of our work group, our local task force. We have another one tomorrow, I think, actually. They're every other Thursday. And so we are seeking that guidance from that research institute at Wayne State to help us in the rolling out of our initiatives and assessing where we're already on pace for October 1st and seeing where we're not on pace and how we're going to get on pace. So we've had one meeting with them. I've had more than one meeting with them. Our administrator, Catherine O'Grady, has had many meetings with them, but we'll continue to meet with them through the process.
And second part to that, since more and more work will go through youth-serving community groups, not through the court system, will the data collection effort go beyond just what the court captures?
I think it will have to. In other words, we will capture what we can capture. But when I sort of gave that shout out to the providers that the child care fund funding needs to be evidence-based and data-driven, I don't know that we will be collecting all that. I don't know how we would collect all that. We can collect some of it if the provider is working through the system with us, but in all the pretrial aspects of it and the new sort of the exciting part about the new changes to childcare is the pretrial use of funding for diversion of youth. And so there wouldn't be a lot of way the court could collect that data. So I think it will be required of the providers to collect and provide that.
Okay, thank you. Kathy Gourlay mentions that last year she had a tour of the Juvenile Detention Center. Although I found most of it to be welcoming, bright, and with large, useful spaces. However, at the back are individual unpleasant rooms for each resident. These are cells, quite small, with no privacy. The toilet is in front of the window door. Its negative effect depends on how much time a child spends alone, locked in his or her room. When I had a tour, no one was living there, which I applaud. Because of its low usage, perhaps every 2 of these small spaces can be remodeled to create one more reasonably sized room, and also a room that has emergency egress.
I'm laughing only because I put my hand to my mouth and it gave me a thumbs up emoji on my screen. So I don't know if you all saw that. I'm not thumbs upping or thumbs downing what Kathy Gourlay has said. I kind of acknowledge that too. I mean, again, I painted a very rosy picture, and I think she did too. What I thought were real strengths of the Juvenile Detention Center. I mean, I'm not going to deny that observation is accurate. I don't know the history of its construction and design. I mean, I'm going to say that it looked a lot like lockups and jail cells that I've seen for adults. And so that's a slightly different, that's not what we're talking about here. And so I'm not going to deny that she has a good point. I don't know from a county funding standpoint or even a evaluation standpoint, what other juvenile detention centers look like or more sort of best practices. But I think that, that's something that our staff, when I say our staff, I think the staff of the detention center is seeking and bringing its best practices to our facility. And so perhaps in redesign or allocation of funding for that, I'm not denying that might be a great fix. Don't know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bonnie Isabel says, good morning. Has there been any conversation around juveniles being questioned by law enforcement without a parent or adult present? I would be interested in discussion legislation I have drafted to create law to mandate no juvenile is questioned without having a parent, legal guardian, or attorney present. And she gives her email address. Or her.
So I mean, the short answer is, again, I have not seen a case where a defense attorney has sought to overturn a petition because of that type of questioning. I can tell you that categorically, when youth is involved in the court system, the youth is informed that they have the right to have a parent with them at every court proceeding. So if there's not a parent there and there's not some sort of waiver, that youth, we will adjourn the hearing to accommodate that. And that every youth is also, if they don't have a private attorney, would be assigned a public defender. So they have the attorney there to speak on their behalf as well. So I just don't know the answer to that as far as the sheriff's department side of it or the police agency side of it. Again, I'm sure that there is existing legislation that restricts that. I'm guessing that, but I haven't seen it it hasn't come before me yet. So I don't know.
And Joseph Costello adds that this would be a return to prior practice from the 80s. I would argue that the presence of a parent would still be part of considering the totality of the circumstances in determining whether the statement was freely given.
And again, I'm not going to dispute that. I can tell you that one of the one of the things that I have to place on the record before a youth would be entering a plea in a case is a question to that youth's parent as to whether there's any reason that I should not accept the plea because of the youth's inability or coercion or capacity. I mean, whatever. And so I don't know the answer to that as far as, again, the sort of the interview or the interrogation standing up. I haven't had that happen. I haven't had a motion to review that, so I don't know.
Okay, Nancy Chihar and Frank Bertram, will data be available to the public?
Short answer is yes. I think that with each of the programs that the court is involved in, contracting with, as far as, kind of being compensated by the child care fund, I think that the data will likely be available. Yeah, I don't see that as being protected information. Because again, it wouldn't, the provider wouldn't be funded through the child care fund if the data wasn't available. And so, we won't be able to partner with a provider if the data is not available.
Okay, Carolyn Stillwell, effectiveness and performance data is important. In order for it to be relevant to our county, communities, there need to be some consistent countywide data that can be looked at and compared pre-post programs. Right now, data is spread throughout various systems and not tied together or easily made available. Is there a plan to bring together data points throughout the various county systems, courts, police precincts, et cetera, and make those available to partners so that they can properly evaluate community impact over time?
That's a big question and a good one. And I don't know that I have any idea. So I know what we use right now, and I'm not saying that that's the only thing that we will use, and we will be, looking to the guidance. Guidance is a warm and fuzzy word. We'll be looking at the direction from MDHHS as far as funding through the child care fund. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer, because as this questioner knows, police agencies have different data collection methods. The court currently uses one. The county would be, we're not all using the same thing. And so I don't know that the child care fund requirements will require that every state and local agency use the same reporting system. So I don't know. That's a great question, and I understand why it would be important, but I don't know that that exists in other areas, and I'm not sure that it will instantly manifest here. I'm perplexed, so I'm putting my hand back to my face. It's not a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Okay.
So I just wanted to note that we have 3 minutes remaining. We'll take a few more questions, and then if we will be saving all questions from the chat, and we can certainly provide them to the judge afterward if we don't have time to have ask all of the questions orally right now. But let's proceed, Jane, with 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. Sarosi, I sit on the governor's JJ committee, standing committee that funded the juvenile justice task force. In that capacity, I've had conversations with DHHS, and they are amenable to providing funding to pilot new ways to provide juvenile justice services that do not touch the court system. So there's no real question with that, but that
I'll just say yay. I mean, that's kind of that's the innovative piece to this. And that's why I'm not being sarcastic. I think that's why statewide, this is such a revolutionary time, because it used to be that these funds were available really only through, mostly, if not entirely, through court services. And I think everybody recognizes that although we try to do it best, we maybe don't deliver the best. I mean, we do our best, but I think that these pre-diversion, pre-charging programming and assessment, behavioral health, job, training, those are what are going to make the difference, whether they're pre or during court involvement. So yes, I think that's great.
one more
Um,
question, Jane.
Okay, sure. Deb Gordon-Gerfinkel to all of us. As a mental health evidence-based program currently in the Washtenaw County Juvenile Detention Center, when will the Child Care Fund RFP be accessible?
Well, I don't exactly know. I actually have a webinar at noon today talking about some of the next steps in terms of the statewide implementation. It would be awfully neat and tidy if I could say at 12:55 today, I'll know. I don't know if that's going to be delivered, but I think we're all just kind of waiting too. So I don't know.
All right, so we'll save the rest of the questions in chat. I wanted to just note that we are 5 months in since this legislation was passed, and we've got 5 months to go before October arrives and there's implementation. So clearly, this is a moving, dynamic change in our court and in our state. It's an exciting time. It can also be a time of fear for some, frustration for others. I mean, there's a lot range of emotions, but thank you, everybody, all of the participants who participated today, asked very good questions. And Judge Conlin, I can't say enough about how very important your honest sharing with us about where you and your staff and the court are at this moment in preparing to implement this important reform of the juvenile justice system in Michigan. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all. Thank everybody here for your involvement, and we can't do it without you. So let's not have any of you drop off after this. Let's keep going together.
Excellent. If you want to know more about the League's juvenile justice team and their advocacy, you can email justice@lwvwashtenaw.org. I hope all of you have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. All right. Thank you.